Let's talk about the summer of 1549. Tudor England was, well, it was on fire. And I don't mean that figuratively. All across the country, ordinary people rose up in what became the biggest wave of rebellion in English history. But the largest, the most organized, and frankly, the most shocking of them all was Kett's Rebellion. So what could possibly push thousands of regular people to that brink? Let's get into it.
And listen, this isn't some historian looking back hundreds of years later. This is a voice from the 16th century, basically quoting the rebels themselves. It just nails that deep, burning sense of injustice, that feeling that everything good in life is being walled off, kept for the rich. That feeling, that was the fuel for this whole thing.
And believe me, this was a massive fire. At its height, you had 16,000 people, an entire rebel army, camped out on a place called Mousehold Heath, right outside the city of Norwich. To give you some perspective, that camp was bigger than England's second largest city at the time. This was no angry mob. This was practically an alternative government, and it was led by a tanner named Robert Kett.
So yeah, that's the big question here, isn't it? This wasn't just some small-time riot. This was a full-blown crisis, a massive threat to the Tudor government. So why? Why would thousands of perfectly ordinary people, farmers, craftsmen, you name it, risk a truly horrible death to take on the entire system? To figure that out, we have to look at the world they were living in.
So, welcome to the middle of the Tudor period. The larger-than-life King Henry VIII is dead. His son, Edward VI, is just a kid. The country's being run by a council, headed up by a guy called Protector Somerset. You've got this huge power vacuum at the top, combined with some really radical new policies being pushed through. The whole country was basically a tinderbox just waiting for a match.
And you can just see on this timeline how fast things started to unravel. In just a couple of years, the government grabs more church wealth by dissolving the chantries. Those were chapels for praying for the souls of the dead. And then, bam, in 1549, they force a brand new prayer book on the entire country. This thing lands like an absolute bombshell. And by that summer, the country just explodes.
You have to understand, this wasn't just a small tweak. This was a seismic shock. For hundreds of years, religion was something you felt and saw. The familiar sound of the Latin Mass, the rituals, the statues. And then, almost overnight, it's all gone. Replaced by a new service in English, with plain churches, and a government telling you that the way your grandparents prayed was just superstition. This was a direct assault on people's identity. And while all this is happening with their faith, people are getting squeezed, and I mean really squeezed. Landlords are putting up fences around common land that villagers needed to graze their animals. The government's messing with the coins, causing crazy inflation that made a loaf of bread impossibly expensive. Rents were going through the roof, and taxes, heavy and constant. To the common person, it just looked like pure greed from the gentry.
Okay, so you've got this pot boiling over with religious anger on one side and economic misery on the other. So which one was it? What was the real trigger? Well, historians have debated this for years, and they've basically come up with three main theories. Let's dig into them.
All right, theory number one. This was straight-up class war. Historians like Andy Wood and John Guy look at the evidence, especially the rebels' own demands, and they see a clear pattern. This was the poor rising up against the rich. They were furious at their landlords, at the local gentlemen, who they saw as getting fat while they starved.
And for those who back the class war theory, this quote is the smoking gun. Kill the gentleman. It was actually written in the official indictment against Robert Kett. Now we got to be a little careful here. This is the government's version of the story, right? They wanted to paint him as a villain. But still, it points to this raw, violent anger simmering just below the surface, and it must have absolutely terrified the ruling class.
But hold on, there's another way to look at this. Theory number two says this was all about religion. The famous historian Eamon Duffy argues that this rebellion was basically a conservative backlash. People were fighting to protect the traditional faith of their ancestors from a radical new Protestantism that was being forced down their throats. That new prayer book in 1549, that was the last straw.
I mean, for the average person, this wasn't some abstract debate. This was personal. The familiar Latin Mass was gone. They couldn't pray for the souls of their dead parents in the same way anymore. Their local church, once full of color and images, was being stripped bare. It felt like a violation, an attack on their entire community and its connection to God.
Okay, but what if it wasn't just about the gentry, and it wasn't just about religion? What if the problem was the government itself? This is theory number three. Historian Ethan Shagan suggests there was a crisis of legitimacy. Protector Somerset's government just seemed weak and indecisive. The rebels felt the government wasn't just doing the wrong things, it was failing to govern at all.
And this is where it gets really interesting. It's all about how the rebels read the signs coming from the government. Somerset starts these commissions to look into illegal enclosures, and the common people think, aha, the government is on our side. He talks about being merciful, and they hear the landlords are the real bad guys. And when he doesn't act decisively, they just see a government that's too weak to stop them. It was like a green light.
So, class war, religious crusade, political breakdown? Which one is it? Well, the real answer is, it's not that simple. You can't just neatly pick one and discard the others.
Kett's rebellion was a perfect storm. Seriously, just put yourself in their shoes for a second. Your landlord is stealing your livelihood. The price of food is insane. Your church has been turned upside down. And the government? It seems to be on your side, but also too weak to do anything about it. It's not one thing, it's everything, all hitting at the exact same time.
So this perfect storm creates this massive, powerful movement. But it was never going to last. The Tudor state might have seemed weak, but it was not about to let an army of 16,000 commoners call the shots. The end, when it came, was incredibly fast and unbelievably brutal.
The government sent in the big guns, the Earl of Warwick, a seriously tough and capable commander, leading a professional army. There was brutal fighting in the streets of Norwich, but Warwick's pros managed to cut off the rebels' supplies. Then, Kett made a catastrophic mistake. He moved his massive army off the high ground of Mousehold Heath and down into an open valley. Why? Probably because of some prophecy that said they'd win there. It was a deadly trap.
And you can see why it was a trap right here. The rebel army, as big and passionate as it was basically a citizen militia. They had farming tools, old-fashioned longbows, and bills. Warwick's army, on the other hand, was a modern killing machine. He had professional soldiers, foreign mercenaries armed with pikes and early firearms, and, this is the key, heavy cavalry. Out in that open valley, it wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't even a battle. It was a slaughter.
More than 3,000 rebels were cut down that day. The government forces showed almost no mercy. This was a terrifying message being sent from the state, a bloody spectacle designed to make sure nobody ever got an idea like this again.
And just to make sure everyone got the message, look at what they did to Robert Kett. They didn't just hang him. They hung him in chains from the walls of Norwich Castle and just left his body there to rot in public for months. It was a gruesome, powerful symbol. This is what happens when you cross us. So yeah, Kett and his followers were utterly crushed, but their rebellion and the reasons for it have echoed down through the centuries. It's a stark reminder that a government's power isn't guaranteed, and it leaves us with a question that never really goes away. What happens when ordinary people are pushed and pushed and pushed until they finally decide they have nothing left to lose?